Okay. After the diplomats and generals and economists, let me turn to the politicians. I come to the young politician, Mr. Gaurav Gogoi. Sir, your two former ministers, namely Sri Anand Sharma and Dr. Shashi Tharoor, have described the visit as a good visit. But your party president pressed the visit as a big show by Mr. Modi to project himself. Now, in the US, you have very bipartisan support for good relations with India, whether Republican or Democrat. I mean, you have support. Why can't we in India also have some bipartisan support when national interests are concerned? Now, if you think this summit was not a success, then what are the areas in which you would have handled it differently? My second question is that, yes, we all know Dr. Manmohan Singh was the architect of civil nuclear deal. It was a paradigm shift. But if he was given credit for signing the civil nuclear deal, by the same token, why shouldn't the current Prime Minister be given credit for signing this agreement which makes the nuclear civil cooperation operational on the company level? Sir.
Thank you, Ambassador. As a young politician, I offer a fresh and somewhat might call it a naive lens into what has happened. So I beg your pardon from all the senior and experienced dignitaries on the dais. But what you had initially said in terms of a big show and a good summit, I don't think that's a paradox. It was a big show, and therefore it was a good summit. The India-US relationship post-Cold War had already turned a new chapter. Successive US presidents had come and really taken forward the dialogue of India-US relationship from being countries which were slightly antagonistic during the Cold War era to a positive framework. And it was also the former presidents such as Bill Clinton and George Bush who had used the term that India and US are natural partners and global allies. So this was not, in this summit, we have yet to take forward that discussion to a much more substantive issue. But I completely understand why it was called also a good summit. We had a new government, we had a new prime minister who had previously not served in the central government, a prime minister who was very closely associated with the development of his state. So there were certain questions within media that how would a new prime minister negotiate the complex scenario of international relations? How would the new prime minister advocate for India's concern at the global forum or at multilateral institutions? Would the new prime minister be able to strike a chord with powerful presidents and prime ministers of the world? And in that, we have seen that there has been a success. Whether it's swinging on a jhula in Gujarat, whether it is referring to the president by his first name, whether it is talking about shirt fronting in Australia, getting rock star welcomes in New York and Madison, we see a prime minister who is confident at the international stage, and that bodes well for India as well, because imagery is important. So I completely stand by both my former minister's views and both my vice president's views as well. Another example of a good show being turned into a good thing was the oath-taking ceremony itself, where the prime ministers and presidents of the neighboring states were invited. But did that yield to a substantive result with vis-a-vis Pakistan or vis-a-vis with Sri Lanka or Bhutan? So those are questions that we need to answer and ask of ourselves. Another question I wanted to raise here is the timing of the visit. We know that President Obama visited India in 2010. Even then, that was post the decision of the US government to announce a pivot to Asia. Even during that summit, President Obama talked about how India and US are two great democracies having common interests related to terrorism. So at this stage, when the President of the United States is in a lame duck period, when the House and Senate are Republicans, when the new President can have a very different orientation towards Asia. My question, therefore, is we've invested so much of political capital, so much of resources in this visit. Would it have been served better had we invited the new President to India and under his and Prime Minister Modi's leadership announced the breakthrough in the nuclear deal? Because we have to understand in the scenario where we are in, with references to Asia-Pacific and maritime security, primarily we are operating in a triangle between India, US, and China. Whether it's in terms of energy resources, whether it's in terms of economic cooperation, or whether it's in terms of maritime security. It's a strategic triangle. If you look at our common concerns, then India and US are often quite aligned, but there are differences as well. It's the same with India and China. There are common concerns, there are common points where we can come together, but at the same time, there are a lot of areas, such as land disputes, such as their construction activities in the Indian Ocean. So there are a lot of things, areas of conflict between India and China as well. And there was a time when the US government could possibly was thinking about a possible G2 configuration, which was US and China. And that would have really strengthened the hand of both US and China, but might have diluted the hand of India. So there are a lot of this reference to G2 can again come back under the new president, depending upon how of the US, depending upon what his worldview is. So I feel, and it has been also echoed by some of my previous panelists as well, in terms of that there's more hard work to do, that there are still a lot of more details. Maybe we wanted a bigger and better shopping list for our defense when it comes to submarines and long-range cruise missiles. We wanted to really address India's carbon footprint in terms of climate change. So there were a lot of sticking points that remained. So as a young politician, the only thing I could say, that was a good show, but ye dil mange more.
Okay.